Stephanie Burgis grew up in Michigan, but now lives in Wales, where she writes historical romantasy for adults, including the Regency Dragon series, the Harwood Spellbook series, and Good Neighbors, as well as fun middle-grade fantasy novels. She has had over 40 short stories published in various magazines and anthologies. Stephanie, take it away.
Hello. I am so pleased to be here, and also I want to warn you that this is my first reading on the Zoom on my phone, so if I drop the phone, please forgive me. I'm going to try not to get too carried away and do that. So I'm going to be reading from a part of Claws and Contrivances where the heroine, Rose Tregarth, is setting out to try to find the so-called monster that her cousin Beth reported finding in their dilapidated old Abbey-cum manor house in Wales, where Rose is a poor relation. Rose found a smile tugging on her lips as she strode through the low-roofed maze of familiar scruffy rooms towards the abandoned buttery where Beth had been very nearly attacked and had escaped only just in time. The skirts of Rose's inherited gown swished purposefully about her legs as she passed through every dark wooden door along the way, and she felt quite like a knight herself, setting out to battle a mysterious new menace in defense of her family's honor. She might not have any interest in the approaching visitor whose academic brilliance her uncle so admired, but she had every interest in keeping her family safe, happy, and well regarded. Uncle Perry had been bursting with unmistakable agitation for days now, peering out of the windows at all times of day and night, and pacing back and forth through the house like a restless ghost as he fretted over whatever intellectual puzzle had led him to summon assistance in the first place. The least Rose could do was keep his long-awaited visitor from being frightened away at the door by marauding rodents. And she had to admit it was entirely satisfying to have a goal that didn't require any uncomfortable soul-searching on her part, unlike the abandoned grand plan in her commonplace book. All she had to do now as she stepped through the final doorway into the cluttered and shadowy end room full of broken furniture and other long-abandoned items was establish the facts, devise a simple strategy, and Rose startled back, heart flying into her throat, as something hurtled directly over her moving feet and flashed past. It was gone before she could even get a proper look, absorbed into the deeper shadows behind the heavy, old, broken oak armoire that stood along the closest wall of the buttery. That hadn't been a mouse. It hadn't even been a rat. It had been much too large for that. She'd caught only an impression, sleek, long, dark, fast, as it had tangled with her skirts in the shadows. And yet, if she hadn't known better... Don't be absurd. Rose stiffened her spine and quelled her rioting imagination with the image of her older sister. What would Eleanor say if she were here? Oh, Rose, you know this isn't one of your silly novels. Even Rose had to admit that she had been rather prone to falling into romantic flights of fancy when she was younger. But somewhere across this hard and fog-bound last year, she had learned better than to believe in impossibilities. Be sensible, she whispered to herself. Her Uncle Perry might be a passionate scholar of dragon legends, but it was a solid and unromantic fact that he would never be able to afford a living dragon of his own. Uncle Perry couldn't even afford to send his daughters to Bath for a season, much less equip any of them with the most stylish and outrageously expensive accessory that any young lady could carry on her shoulder nowadays to attract a husband. Like everyone else in the nation, Rose had seen plenty of sketches of pet dragons in the newspaper society columns ever since they had been so famously rediscovered. That was where they belonged, though, in dazzling high society ballrooms, surrounded by flashing diamonds and haughty aristocrats, not hiding behind broken furniture in a sad, dark little room packed full of her extended family's unwanted belongings. Her uncle and aunt hadn't the heart to dispose of even their most useless old possessions. Much like Rose, every item in this room was housed as an act of charity. Now you're simply being maudlin. It was her younger sister's tart voice that Rose heard in her head this time. Harriet had always been the best at piercing her moments of melodrama. Shaking herself free of the descending fog, Rose took a restorative breath and sank to her knees on the dusty floor to peer into the shadows. It was a warm, bright afternoon outside, but the leaded window at the far end of the buttery was almost entirely blocked by a stack of broken chairs that had been piled haphazardly atop an ugly and old-fashioned chaise lounge. Only faint and narrow streams of light escaped around the gaps or filtered in from the room next door. enough to outline every horrifyingly jumbled piece of clutter on the floor, but nowhere near enough to pierce the thick darkness that lay behind the hulking armoire. Hello? This creature had to be a cat to move so swiftly. That was the only plausible explanation. Remembering various felines she had known in her first village, Rose shifted back to give it space, even as she clicked her tongue in soft enticement. If you're looking for food, puss, you've come to the wrong room. There's nothing to fear, though. Beth would have spoiled your heart out if you'd only given her a pitiful look. No one in this family would ever turn away astray. You should come out and let me show you to the others. Just wait. Within a week, you'll be the roundest, happiest house pet imaginable. Something shifted in the darkness, as if the creature was actually considering her promise. As casually as possible, Rose laid her hand beside the gap between the armoire and the wall and tapped her fingertips lightly against the dirty floorboards in a ripple of temptation. Why don't you come and introduce yourself properly so my poor cousin doesn't have to worry about impossible monsters anymore? Something scraped against the wall behind the armoire, and Rose blinked. That hadn't sounded like cat fur. Claws scratched against the floorboards, and then, in a sudden frantic rush, before Rose could think better of her unprotected position, that long form exploded out from the gap and landed in front of her, panting with unambiguous terror. Golden eyes caught her own in a wild and desperate plea from a small, rectangular, wine-red face framed by two crooked horns. Small, clipped wings fluttered about the creature's long and glittering back, but couldn't lift its body from the ground. A sinuous forked tail stuck out through the open doorway in a straight line of panic. Rose swallowed hard as she gazed down into the dragon's shining and impossible eyes. Perhaps, she whispered, Beth wasn't wrong about everything after all. And I want to stop here so I have enough time to just let you know my giveaway, which is something you will already have if you're a newsletter subscriber. But if you're not yet a newsletter subscriber, I want to let you know that if you sign up, it's stephanieburgess.com/newsletter or do it through the SWSW today, then every subscriber automatically gets a free copy of the optional epilogue to Claws and Contrivances, which takes place about 3 years after the end of this book.